Elias lived in a small wooden house at the edge of a quiet valley. His home was not large, not strong, and not rich. It had only one floor, a little garden at the back, and shelves filled with books and tools he had made with his own hands. Most people in the nearby town barely remembered his name. They only knew him as the quiet man who preferred to be alone. Elias liked life this way. He had no need for fame or wealth. Instead, he enjoyed reading old stories, repairing broken machines, and drawing new ideas in his notebooks. His home looked like nothing special from the outside, but inside it was filled with small wonders: handmade devices, glass bottles of glowing liquids, and maps filled with stars. Yet behind this simple life was a secret no one else knew. Months earlier, a bright light had fallen across the night sky. Elias, curious and fearless, had followed the trail deep into the forest. There he had found something that no one could have imagined: a giant woman, tall as a tree, lying broken and weak near the smoking remains of a strange ship. Her body had been wounded, her armor cracked, and her face pale with pain. Elias had felt no fear. Instead, he felt pity. He had run back to his little home, bringing tools, medicine, and water. For days and nights he worked without rest, cleaning her wounds, creating mixtures from herbs, and building machines to help her breathe. Slowly, the giantess had opened her eyes. She had looked down at the small human who cared for her, and in her strange language she spoke words Elias did not understand. But he understood the look in her eyes: gratitude, deep and endless. From that day on, the giantess lived in the valley, hidden from the world. She healed quickly, her strength returning, yet she never left Elias's side. She told him her name was Leora, and though her words were heavy and strange, Elias learned them piece by piece. Leora explained that she came from a world far away, a place where honor was life itself. In her culture, saving someone's life created a bond stronger than chains of iron. Because Elias had saved her, she swore herself to him. Elias laughed when she first said this. He told her he was no master, no commander, only a man with a small home and small dreams. But Leora did not agree. To her, his kindness was greater than any throne. Weeks turned into months. Elias grew used to her presence, though every time she knelt to speak with him, the earth shook beneath her. She listened to his ideas, helped him carry heavy things, and guarded his home like a silent wall. Life was peaceful, until the day the armies came. It began with the hum of machines in the distance. Elias was fixing a broken lamp when he noticed the noise. At first, he thought it was a storm rolling across the hills, but soon the ground shook with steady rhythm. He stepped outside and saw dust rising at the edge of the valley. Tanks, soldiers, machines of war. Elias's heart sank. Somehow the outside world had learned of Leora's presence. Perhaps someone had followed her trail, or perhaps strange lights in the sky had drawn their attention. Whatever the reason, they were here now, surrounding his tiny home. Dozens of armored vehicles rolled into the valley. Soldiers spread out, weapons raised, voices loud through their speakers. They ordered Elias to step outside. They told him he was harboring something dangerous, something that belonged to them. Elias stood at his doorway, his hands trembling. He wanted to speak, to explain, but the soldiers paid no attention to his words. They were here for Leora, not for him. Then the ground shook again, heavier than before. A shadow fell across the house. Soldiers froze, their voices breaking into silence. Slowly, with steps that made the earth tremble, Leora appeared from behind the trees. Her figure rose tall against the morning sun, her silver armor catching the light. She was no longer weak, no longer broken. She stood in full strength, towering above the army that surrounded them. Gasps spread through the soldiers. Some aimed their weapons, some stepped back in fear, but Leora did not attack. She did not raise her hands or lift her voice. Instead, she walked forward, her giant form bending low until her knees pressed into the earth. The valley seemed to hold its breath. Elias's eyes widened as the giantess bowed her head to him, lowering herself so far that her face was level with his small garden. Her voice, deep yet gentle, echoed through the valley. "Your order, master?" she asked, her lips curved in a faint smile. The soldiers stared in shock. Elias stood frozen, unable to believe what had just happened. Armies surrounded his home, ready to strike, but the most powerful being among them had just knelt at his feet. And in that single moment, Elias realized the world would never be the same again. The valley had turned silent. Even the engines of the armored vehicles seemed to hush when Leora knelt before Elias. The soldiers who only moments ago shouted orders now stood frozen, their eyes wide with disbelief. Elias himself could hardly breathe. His hands trembled as he looked at the giantess who lowered her head to him. Her silver eyes glowed faintly, and her lips repeated the words with calm strength. "Your order, master." To her it was a vow. To the soldiers, it was a nightmare. Shouts broke the silence at last. The commanders barked into radios, their voices tight with alarm. "Hold fire! Hold fire! Do not engage!" They had prepared for a battle, but none had prepared for this. A being of enormous power bowing like a servant to an ordinary man. Elias raised his hand quickly. "Stand up, Leora," he whispered, his voice urgent. "Don't do this." But Leora did not rise. Her voice carried across the valley, strong and clear. "I cannot stand above you. My life is bound to yours. Speak, and I will act. Command, and I will obey." Elias's heart pounded. He saw the soldiers' eyes turn to him. To them he now looked like a hidden ruler, someone who had tamed a being far stronger than their weapons. "I am no master," Elias said loudly, his voice shaking yet firm. "She is not my servant. She is my friend." The soldiers did not believe him. The way she knelt, the way her every word declared loyalty, it all looked like proof that he commanded her. One of the officers stepped forward. His face was stern, but his eyes revealed unease. "Human," he shouted, "you will order this creature to surrender. Now." Elias shook his head. "She is not a creature. She has a name. She is Leora, and she chooses to be here." The officer scowled. "Then you leave us no choice." He raised his hand, signaling the soldiers to prepare. Before Elias could speak again, Leora's eyes flashed. The ground trembled as she shifted slightly, lowering her hand in front of him like a wall of living steel. She did not attack. She did not move toward the soldiers. She simply shielded Elias with her enormous palm, her voice calm but sharp. "No harm shall come to him," she declared. The soldiers hesitated. Their weapons, aimed and ready, suddenly looked weak compared to her size and strength. She could crush tanks with her hands, yet she did not strike. She only defended. Elias pressed his hand against her finger, as if calming her. "Leora, please don't fight them," he whispered. She looked at him, her giant eyes softening. "If you command peace, I will keep peace," she answered. Elias turned to the soldiers. His fear gave way to something stronger, resolve. "Listen to me. She is not here to conquer. She is not here to destroy. She is here because I helped her, that is all." The officer shouted back. "Lies! No being of such power bows unless forced." At those words, Leora lifted her head slightly. Her gaze swept across the valley, her voice steady but filled with meaning. "Your world does not understand my people. We do not bow because of force. We bow because of honor. This man gave me life when I had none. He treated me as more than a weapon. That is why I kneel. Not for power, not for fear, but for gratitude." Her words echoed across the hills. Soldiers exchanged glances. Some lowered their weapons, unsure. The image before them, an alien giantess defending a single human, not with violence but with devotion, did not match the warnings they had been told. Still, the commander would not yield. He turned again to Elias, his voice sharp. "If you truly command her, then prove it. Order her to surrender herself to us." Elias's stomach tightened. He looked at Leora, who waited silently for his decision. He knew one word from him could change everything. If he told her to obey, she would. If he told her to fight, the valley would drown in chaos. But Elias shook his head firmly. I will not give such an order. She is free to choose, and she has chosen to stand with me. For a moment, only the wind moved. Then from the hills above, a sound broke the tension. A news drone hovered into view, its camera glowing red as it recorded the scene. Then another and another. Soon the sky filled with small machines, broadcasting the event live to the world. On screens across the planet, people watched as a simple man stood before armies, protected by a giant who called him master. They heard his refusal to treat her as property. They saw her bow not in chains, but in respect. The story spread like fire. Some whispered fear. Has humanity been conquered? Others felt wonder. Why would such a powerful being choose to kneel to one of us? Back in the valley, the commander realized the world's eyes were now upon him. His hand lowered slowly. The order to attack caught in his throat. Any wrong move would be remembered forever. Leora finally rose to one knee, her enormous form still towering above all. She looked at Elias, awaiting his next word. Elias, she said softly, yet her voice carried across the entire valley. Your world does not trust me, but tell me, what is your will? Shall I fight for you or stand in peace? Elias felt every gaze upon him, soldiers, cameras, even Leora herself. His tiny home behind him seemed fragile, yet the choice before him was greater than any he had faced in his quiet life. And as the sun set behind the mountains, the question hung in the air. What order would a humble man give? When the power of a giant knelt waiting for his word, the sun was sinking low, painting the valley in shades of gold and red. The soldiers still surrounded Elias's home, their weapons ready, their orders unclear. In front of them stood Leora, towering and strong, her body a shield for the man she called master. But Elias knew this could not last forever. One wrong move, one nervous soldier pulling a trigger, and the valley would turn into a battlefield. He did not want war. He did not want his quiet life to become a story of fire and blood. Leora, Elias whispered, looking up at her giant face. Promise me you won't harm them. Not unless there is no other way. Her silver eyes softened. She bowed her head slightly. If that is your will, then I will not strike. But they will strike at you. Then we must outthink them, Elias replied. The soldiers waited for orders from their commanders. They were nervous, unsure, yet still dangerous. Tanks lined the ridges, their cannons pointed straight at the tiny house. Elias took a deep breath. His mind raced through possibilities. He had no weapons of power, no armor, no army. But he had something else, his inventions. For years, in the quiet of his valley, he had built small devices that no one cared about. Now for the first time they would matter. He hurried into his house, ignoring the shouts of soldiers who demanded he stay where they could see him. Inside, he grabbed a bundle of small glass orbs filled with pale blue liquid, and a device that looked like nothing more than a lantern. When he stepped outside again, the soldiers aimed their weapons, but Elias held the objects high. These are not bombs, he said clearly. They are lights. Lights that will blind your machines. The soldiers did not believe him, but Leora's calm presence kept them from firing. Elias placed the orbs around the edge of his garden, spacing them in a circle. He then pressed a button on the lantern. In an instant, the orbs glowed brightly, releasing waves of harmless but powerful light. The tanks on the ridge tried to move forward, but their sensors scrambled. The lights interfered with their targeting systems. The soldiers' visors filled with static. They stumbled back, confused and half-blind. Gasps spread among them. Some thought Elias had released alien technology. But these were his own creations, simple mixtures of minerals, magnets, and glass. Human science. Human cleverness. Stand back, the commander shouted. Do not advance. From behind his shield of light, Elias called out, Do you see? She does not need to fight you. I do not need weapons of destruction. You cannot win here without destroying yourselves. Go back before this becomes something worse. The soldiers hesitated. The commander clenched his fists. He wanted victory, yet the world was watching. The news drones hovered like silent judges, recording every word, every choice. Meanwhile, Leora remained still, her huge hands resting gently on the ground, her body unmoving except for the rise and fall of her breath. She kept her promise, no violence, only defense. Hours passed as the standoff continued. The valley was filled with tension, the soldiers afraid to advance, Elias unwilling to yield. Then in the towns beyond, people began to gather around screens. They saw the broadcast. The image of a giant alien kneeling in peace while a simple man defended her not with force but with wit. Children pointed at the screens with wonder. "Why does she bow to him?" they asked. Elders whispered, "Perhaps kindness is stronger than fear." In military bases far away, leaders argued. Some demanded attack. Others warned that attacking might provoke more of her kind if they existed. And in homes everywhere, ordinary people began to admire the strange man in the valley who refused both violence and surrender. Back in the valley, the commander grew restless. He stepped forward again. "You cannot hold us off forever. We have more men, more machines. Your lights will fail." Elias looked at him steadily. "Maybe so. But for every machine you send, I will build something to stop it. Not to kill, but to protect. You may think me small, but you are wrong. Humanity is small only in size, not in spirit." Leora's lips curved in the faintest smile. She had heard many speeches of strength in her life, but none like this. Soft words, yet filled with unshakable resolve. Night fell. The glow of Elias's devices lit the valley in strange blue light. The soldiers stayed back, unable to advance. The giantess knelt in silence, her shadow stretching across the field. And in the darkness, Elias knew the world had already changed. People across the planet had seen the truth. A simple man, standing before armies, defended not by violence but by his own mind, and by the loyalty of a giantess who chose peace because he asked it of her. Yet he also knew this was only the beginning. The armies would not leave forever. The leaders of the world would not forget what they had witnessed. And somewhere beyond the stars, perhaps others of Leora's kind were watching, waiting to see what humanity would do next. Elias stood beside his tiny home, his heart heavy but steady. He looked up at Leora, who lowered her gaze to him as if awaiting his next thought. "Tomorrow will be harder," Elias murmured. "Yes," Leora agreed softly, "but tomorrow I will still kneel, and tomorrow I will still protect." Elias closed his eyes, knowing that the quiet life he once loved was gone. The valley had become a stage for the whole world. And on that stage he had chosen not war but peace, even as the weight of armies pressed against his small home. The next morning, the valley woke to a calm that felt uneasy. The soldiers had not advanced, but their presence still pressed against the small wooden house. Tanks rested along the ridges, men watched from behind armored shields, and radios crackled with orders and arguments. Yet Elias remained calm, standing in the soft light of dawn, Leora kneeling beside him, her massive form a silent wall of protection. "Elias," Leora said quietly, her voice carrying easily across the valley. "They watch us. They expect me to obey, to fight. What shall I do?" Elias shook his head. "I cannot tell you to fight. That is not my way, but I cannot let them take you either. We must find another path." The soldiers noticed the quiet conversation and whispered among themselves. They did not understand. From their perspective, the giantess had only one choice: obey or strike. Yet here she was, kneeling, waiting for a word that would not come. Then emissaries arrived. They came in vehicles painted with official colors, carrying promises of wealth, fame, and safety, if Elias surrendered the alien warrior. One man stepped forward, his voice loud and commanding. "Human," he said, "hand over the giantess. She belongs to the future of our world. You will be rewarded beyond measure, or punished if you refuse." Elias took a deep breath, glancing at Leora. "She does not belong to anyone," he said firmly. "She is free, and she chooses to stay here with me. That is her decision." The emissaries' faces darkened. "This is madness," one muttered. "Do you not see what she could do? You could rule the world with her strength." Elias shook his head. "I do not want to rule. I do not want power. I only want peace." And she agrees. The giantess lowered her head in respect, yet her eyes sparkled. She had heard many speeches in her life, declarations of power, commands of loyalty, but she had never heard one like this. Elias's words were not threats, nor were they promises of conquest. They were a choice, and that choice, given freely, was stronger than any order she had ever obeyed. "You have given her freedom," one emissary said, his voice tinged with anger, "and yet she kneels." "Yes," Elias replied softly, "because I did not take it away." Leora shifted slightly, kneeling on the soft earth. "Freedom is not the same as absence of duty," she said in her deep voice. "It is the ability to choose. And I have chosen." The soldiers in the valley exchanged uneasy glances. Some lowered their weapons, unsure how to respond. Others tightened their grips, afraid of what might happen if they hesitated. As the tension grew, Leora spoke again, her voice carrying a weight that silenced even the radios.
Humanity is different from my people.
Strength is measured not only in power but in wisdom. This man has shown me both. He asked for peace, not obedience. That is why I kneel. Elias looked at her, understanding her meaning. She was not simply following a command. She was showing the world a choice, an example of loyalty born from respect and gratitude, not fear. Suddenly, the earth trembled beneath them. Elias looked up, heart pounding. From the distant mountains, massive shadows moved. Others of Leora's kind had arrived, enormous figures observing silently from the cliffs above. Their eyes, like hers, glowed softly in the morning light. The emissaries stepped back, fear evident on their faces. "There is more of them," one whispered. Leora rose slightly on one knee, her massive head turned toward Elias. "Do not fear," she said. "They watch not to attack but to see what I have chosen. If I follow your lead, they will learn that humanity can be trusted." Elias swallowed. The responsibility weighed on him like a mountain. The choice he had made, to ask for peace, to refuse command, to insist on respect, was now being observed by beings far older and stronger than anything Earth had ever known. "Your world is complicated," Leora said softly, "but your heart is true. That is why I kneel. That is why I stand with you." The emissaries turned, realizing that threats and promises could not sway the bond between Elias and Leora. They could see it in her eyes, in her stance, in the way she moved, not as a weapon, but as a protector. Elias looked at the soldiers surrounding his home. "Today we do not fight," he said. "We show them that strength is not only in power but in choice. That is the measure of humanity." The giantess nodded, bowing her head slightly. "I understand," she said, "and I will act only to protect, not to harm. Even if the world tests us, I will follow your example." The sun rose higher, casting light on the tiny house, the massive kneeling figure, and the valley filled with humans who had never before seen such a scene. In that moment, Elias understood something profound. He had not only saved a life, but he had shown that humans could inspire loyalty, respect, and honor even from being stronger than any army. The emissaries retreated, leaving the valley in uneasy silence. They understood at last that Elias's choice had changed the rules of power. The soldiers still remained, but they now watched not as conquerors but as witnesses. And Leora, the giantess, had made her choice. She would not fight unless necessary. She would not obey unless it was an act of respect. And she would stand beside Elias not because he was a master, but because he had earned her trust. Elias felt the weight of the moment. The valley was quiet again, but the world beyond had already begun to change. Somewhere out there, other eyes, human and alien, were watching. And tomorrow the real test would begin. For now, however, the giantess knelt, her shadow long across the earth, and Elias knew that his tiny home had become a symbol of something far greater: the power of choice, respect, and courage. The dawn broke over the valley with soft golden light. The quiet of the night had brought no attack, no sudden assault, only an uneasy calm. Elias stood at the edge of his tiny garden, looking at the horizon where the mountains met the sky. His heart pounded, not from fear, but from the weight of what was about to happen. Leora knelt beside him, her massive form casting a long shadow across the valley. Her silver eyes shone with calm strength. She had kept her promise. No harm had come to the soldiers. No force had been used, yet her presence alone had made the armies hesitate. And now, beyond the valley, more figures appeared. Colossal shapes descended from the sky, their wings and forms glinting in the morning sun. Elias recognized them from the distant mountains, the rest of Leora's people. Yet they did not approach aggressively. They hovered, observing, waiting. Their eyes were fixed on the valley, on Elias, on the giantess who had chosen peace. The soldiers and emissaries in the valley froze. Tanks and guns, trained on the tiny wooden house just a day ago, now seemed powerless in comparison to the colossal beings above. Fear mixed with awe. For the first time, humanity faced a choice that went beyond weapons and strategy. Elias took a deep breath and stepped forward. He could feel every gaze upon him, Soldiers, emissaries, the giant warriors above, and even the millions of people watching the live broadcasts. The world was silent, waiting for a single human to decide. He looked at Leora. "This is the moment," he said softly. "You could fight and none could stop you. You could strike and the valley would burn. But we do not choose that. We choose peace." Leora nodded slowly, kneeling deeper into the earth as if bowing not to command but to the human who had shown her the strength of restraint. "Then we show them the truth," she said. "Strength is not in destruction. Strength is in honor, in trust, in choice." The soldiers shifted uneasily. Some looked down at their boots, ashamed to have doubted this human and the giantess. Others whispered to each other, unsure how to respond to a power that refused to obey or attack. Elias raised his hands. "We will not fight you. We will not surrender either. But if you stay, if you watch, you will see what humans can be. We are small in size but not in spirit. We can choose courage. We can choose kindness. And we can choose peace even when war is easy." Leora rose slightly on one knee, towering above the valley. Her massive shadow stretched across the soldiers. Yet she did not threaten, she only stood in silent strength. Behind her, the other giant figures shifted, forming a silent circle, their presence calm but commanding. The emissaries whispered among themselves. "They came to conquer," one said. "And yet, they bow?" "Yes," Ilias replied. "They bow not to me. They bow because I showed them respect. Because I chose not to use fear. That is the power of humanity." For a long moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then slowly, the soldiers began to step back. Tanks rumbled as drivers hesitated, unsure of what they were meant to do. Radios crackled with orders, but the commanders themselves were silent, watching a scene that no strategy could explain. From the cliffs and mountains, Leora's people slowly descended, kneeling in unison. Their giant forms touched the earth lightly, a gesture of respect, not attack. The valley was filled with a strange, awe-inspiring calm. Elias looked at the tiny wooden house behind him. He had never imagined that his quiet life, his small acts of kindness would change the world in such a way. But here he was, standing before armies, before emissaries, and before an alien race, showing that humanity could rise, not by strength, but by choice. Then, a soft wind blew across the valley. Leora's hand rested gently on Elias's shoulder. "They will remember this," she said. "Not only the power we have, but the trust we place in one another." The soldiers, once ready to attack, began to lower their weapons fully. The emissaries turned away, realizing that threats, promises, and fear could not undo what had been shown here. Humanity had been measured not by their machines but by their hearts, and the world saw it. Across continents, people cheered quietly at first, then louder as the broadcast spread. News outlets called it miraculous. Social media overflowed with messages of hope. Children and adults alike looked at the screens and whispered, "We can be strong in the right way." Elias smiled softly. He had not commanded an army. He had not ruled a kingdom. But he had done something perhaps greater. He had shown that the smallest human could inspire loyalty, respect, and honor, even from the greatest of beings. Leora knelt fully, bowing her head to him one last time. "Your example has changed everything," she said. "You are not a master of war. You are a master of choice. And for that we stand with you." The sun rose higher, casting light on the tiny wooden house, the enormous kneeling giantess, and the valley now filled with awestruck humans and aliens alike. Elias understood finally that this day would be remembered not for power nor for fear, nor for conquest, but for what humanity could be when it chose courage, kindness, and honor. And as the armies retreated and the emissaries disappeared, one thing was clear. Humanity had answered the question of the universe not with weapons, but with spirit. Elias turned back to his home, to his books, his tools, and the garden he had built with simple hands. And beside him, Leora rose fully, smiling. The giantess he saved had not only knelt to him, she had helped the world see what humans could truly become. In that quiet valley, surrounded by awe and respect, Elias knew that humanity had finally taken its first real step among the stars.